Oh, police! Show me your hand!
The story of Chris Kaba's shooting begins and ends on Kirkstall Gardens in South London. See how he drives forwards and backwards trying to escape. The firearms officer, Martyn Blake, believed his and his colleagues' lives were in danger. A single shot is fired and Mr. Kaba died from catastrophic brain injury. Mr. Blake was acquitted yesterday. The story of Mr. Kaba's past can now be disclosed for the first time. None of Chris Kaba's criminal history was reported during his murder trial because the judge ruled that it wasn't relevant. When Martyn Blake pulled the trigger that night, he didn't know the background information and he didn't know who was driving the car. You're about to see CCTV footage from a shooting that happened a week before Kaba was killed. It's August the 30th, 2022. That's Chris Kaba under the Blue Arrow arriving at the Oval nightclub in Bethnal Green. He makes it through the search and becomes just another body in a teeming crowd. Only Chris Kaba, on the left, is handed a gun in a bag, and soon he spots a rival gang member who's under the red arrow. The Blue Arrow is Chris Kaba approaching and then firing. Here, you can see the bullet. A chase begins. Here he's seen running and pointing a gun. This shows the victim, shot in the leg, collapsing onto the pavement. He survived.
SRB separation confirmed.
This is the 6-7 gang, of which Chris Kaba was a member. They make music videos. Chris Kaba is in this one. During the nightclub trial, it emerged that rivalry between the 6-7 gang and another called 17 sparked the shooting. 8 months ago, Shemaiah Bell, Marcus Pottinger and Conall Bamboye were found guilty of possession of a firearm with intent to cause fear of violence. During the trial, Kaba was described as principal gunman for 6-7. The Audi that Kaba travelled in to the nightclub, not registered to him, came up again the night before he was shot. At a shooting near a primary school in Brixton, no one was hurt. The very next night, firearms officers were briefed as they started out on their shift. Note the Brixton shooting, they were told. The suspects are still at large and a marker has been placed on the Audi. Last year, we spoke to Chris Kaba's family and asked for their thoughts on his previous convictions.
Chris was unarmed. That means there is no reason enough to kill Chris.
Chris Kaba became part of the criminal justice system at the age of 13, convicted for possession of a kitchen knife. That was one of 6 convictions over the years, including wounding with intent and affray. The year before he was killed, he was released from custody after being sentenced to 4 years in a young offenders institution for possession of an imitation firearm with intent to cause fear and violence. Last night, after the verdict, the Justice for Chris Kaba group assembled to make their voices heard. Yesterday, the Met Commissioner talked about the spirit of good officers being crushed. Many people here feel the not guilty verdict has deepened mistrust between the police and the black community.
Ria Chatterjee reporting. Well, earlier I spoke to the former Met Chief Superintendent Dal Babu, and I began by asking him about firearms training and what officers are taught when carrying out a so-called hard stop.
The key is to try and do it safely and to avoid having to use force. And if you're discharging a firearm, it can potentially, as it was in this case, be fatal. Now, Chris Kaba was driving the Audi, the police vehicles. The footage that's been released, you've got him ramming the police vehicles forward and backwards. You could hear the car revving. You can hear the officers saying, "Get out of the way, be careful," because they would have been aware that this is somebody in a vehicle with a firearms marker.
Of course, no firearm was found in the car. He was unarmed. People will be asking, could they have shot out the tyres? Is there something else they could have done? Could they have shot him somewhere else where he was perhaps wounded?
Yeah, so the police officer was saying that they has the instructions aiming for the body mass, but this was a vehicle that was moving back and forth and through a windscreen. I think sometimes people watch American films, they think that police officers can shoot a gun out of somebody's hand. Somebody can shoot a knee. They're very, very difficult shots to have. But these officers who have got those skills have been selected because they are marksmen and women who are very good at managing a situation like that.
I suppose it's why people hope or expect that they might be able to do that without killing someone.
Yeah, but I'm afraid, you've got the reality is very different from what movies. So if you imagine that car had escaped from there on rims, the tyres had been shot out, how dangerous would that have been? What would have happened if that car then collides with somebody or kills somebody else?
Obviously, there's been a huge discussion today about whether this officer should ever have been charged with murder, whether this should have gone through the courts. What's your view on that?
Murder it's a high bar, so I was extremely surprised that the officer had been charged with murder. I think there's some questions for the Independent Office of Police Conduct. Who were their investigators? What experience did they have of firearms incidents? Did they understand what was involved in a firearms operation?
But the family and friends of Chris Kaba would have wanted and would deserve a proper investigation into what happened. And surely court is the best place for that.
There's a difference between an investigation and there's a difference between a charge. So absolutely, there needs to be a thorough investigation that's transparent and open, absolutely. But to charge somebody with an offence that's unlikely, you have to ask, were the Independent Office for Police Conduct in their consultant with the CPS, were they swayed by public opinion?
But the CPS would have made the decision.
Absolutely.
They're supposed to be absolutely above public opinion, aren't they?
Well, that's a question to ask the CPS and the Independent Office for Police Conduct is were you looking, what was the evidence you were looking at? What made you think that you were going to get a conviction for murder?
Where else would the family go to get an investigation that they would have trust in? Because we know trust from particularly the black community in the Met Police, for example, is really low.
Yeah, the trust in the police is low in all sections of the community. You're absolutely right. It's the lowest amongst the black community. I think the other.
But this isn't going to help it, is it?
No, it's not, Jackie. But I think it's really, really important to look at the makeup of firearms commanders. When I was a firearms commander, I would often be doing the briefing. I would often be the only person of colour in that room with firearms officers. So there's something about reflecting a command where there's a lack of trust in the community that's more reflective of the wider community.
Dal Babu, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.